Okay, so I'm sorry I haven't talked to you guys again for a little bit. I've been deep thinking about things that I don't know how to put into words yet. I still don't know how to put into words, but I just want to check in and give you a little thought. So I I've been thinking about how, and I expressed it in, I can't remember where I expressed it. I expressed it somewhere to you guys before, but the idea that what what it is that each of us are is an amalgamation or a sum total of the relationships that we engage in. We engage in a relationship, and through that relationship come to know ourselves, come to gain an identity, and through that we interact with that in the world. I've been thinking about that and trying to understand, like, at its root, like, what is this thing that's having the relationships? What is this part of the relationship that we're playing? And it kept leading me nowhere. It kept leading me in loops because it would lead me to seek for the other half of the relationship, and then I realized that the relationship itself is a fundamental unity, and I would keep trying to split that, but that's not. So I've been going around in circles in my mind, and it took me to. I have a Buddhist society near me with a bunch of monks, a bunch of very good monks, and there's a top monk there called the head monk is called Ajahn Brahm. So I went to him. I had a little talk with him about this problem, and I worded it in terms of shunyata and anatta, Buddhist terminology. Shunyata I've talked about before, being the relative nature of things, the fact that the out of relationships, what the world is arises, and what I was speaking before, our ourselves, our identity. Through the relationships we have, an identity of self arises. In the same way, you could say a film or a piece of a theatre or something, you go and see a play, your identity with the narrative is exactly equal to the whatever you're shown. Whatever part of the movie you're shown, that's what you identify with in that moment, and that's the story you engage with. So in that way, the story we each engage with is the relationships we're engaged within, consciously and unconsciously united. So I talked to Ajahn Brahm. I talked to a Buddhist monk, and he hinted me towards the fact that I was being too cerebral about something that is experiential, and that I needed to step into the unknown if I was to truly understand it, not just think about it. So I did that to the extent one can. Well, no, not to the extent. I've only done it slightly. Yeah, I still need to do it a lot more. But I disappeared. I sat in the unknown, and I tried to feel it. I tried to understand what it was from an experiential point of view. And something I'd missed for so long became apparent quite quickly. And this comes to speaking on free will, which I know it's something I want to talk to you more about in the future, because it's in my mind. It's in my mind. Free will. What does it mean? Does it apply? Sorry, just lost my train of thought for a moment there. I love all you guys so much. I really appreciate that each one of you who comes here, listens, and engages with the thoughts and the conversation. It's probably the most meaningful thing that I get from being RAZE God, is actually communicating with you guys and forming some kind of understanding of how the world possibly could be. Alright, I remember. I was experiencing the world as the unknown, and it became aware to me that, for example, these relationships I was speaking on engaging in become forming the identity of self. When I ceased to engage in these relationships, in the extent that I sat there and stopped jumping on every thought, disengaged, was pure awareness, I realized that none of these things are particularly here right now. They come and go, but they're not particularly here right now. So that means they're not these relationships which arise, which I identify with, they're not a permanent self. And I knew that, but I'd gone so long thinking about the state of these relationships that I got stuck thinking that what I was the amalgam of these relationships. But here's the simple trick. Here's the simple misconception that I was engaged in. There are a net of relationships. There are a web of relationships out of which identities arise and structures arise and forms and bodies, etc. But we are not those relationships. We are the awareness of those relationships. And it's that simple of a misunderstanding that I had been engaging in. Self, what we are, is the awareness of an experience. That experience which we have is made up out of relationships, and the relationships determine the identity of the particular experience. But we are not any of that. We are the pure awareness of all of it. And in that way, we lie under all experience. Now, there's a lot of stuff to talk about on this, but I tried to talk about this out loud last night, and it took me like fucking 2 hours to explain a lot of the shit, because there's a lot of different concepts going on. So, I'll leave it at that for a moment, see if anything else comes in my mind. But otherwise, nothing in this world, the relationships that arise, any of that, nothing is truly you. They're things that we identify with, but the self, is the pure awareness, I think. That's what I'm coming to remember. And this doesn't nullify previous things. The relationships that arise and we identify with, it's still the thing, but that's not the substructure. That happens within awareness. Awareness is the substructure. Awareness is what self is. We are awareness. And to round it back to the Buddhist principle of what Ajahn Brahm told me at the Buddhist Society, anatta, which is one of I've spoken on shunyata more directly to you guys, but anatta is the idea that there is no permanent unchanging self. And so what I'd got stuck on was the idea that there is no self, or rather no stable self. I was looking for the subset of environment that created the self, and therefore I was narrowing in on these relationships. But those relationships are not permanent and unchanging, as I came to realize. All relationships, just as with all the identification with those relationships, are constantly changing. So anatta, the fact that there is no permanent unchanging self, actually fits perfectly with the idea of self as awareness, because awareness, that which you're aware of, is constantly changing. That's what we can know awareness of. It's an awareness of fluctuation, of constant change. And in that way, it lies at the root of self, because self, there is no permanent unchanging self. Self is permanently changing, and that which is permanently changing is our awareness. Praise God.